Good morning. Today is 15 February, the year 2013. I'm Dr. Dave Thompson, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in Palm Springs, California. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in our country's military conflicts. Today, I'm here at the museum and have the honor and privilege of interviewing Ms. Cassandra Porter Runnels. Ms. Runnels is a program administrator for the Navy Child Youth Program at Fallon Naval Air Station in Nevada and has been attached to the Navy for some 30 years. So we're going to talk to her about that and a lot of other things. So good to have you here.
Thank you.
Cassandra.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, let me get you lined up here. Is that the pretty girl we're going to talk to? Yes, okay. Okay, Cassandra, would you please repeat and spell your full name for us?
Yes, my name is Cassandra Porter Runnels, Cassandra, Porter-Runnels.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Evansville, Indiana, in 1958.
And the date?
September 14th.
September 14th, 1950. Okay. You were born the year after I graduated from high school in Evansville, Indiana.
Oh, good.
So we have a little bit in common, do we not?
Yes, absolutely.
And also a mutual friend and relative in the old Buffalo Soldier.
Yes.
George Buckner Edwards.
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Okay. And your dad, what was his name?
My father was Lil Clemens Porter. He was a staff sergeant in the Army, and my mother was Carmelita Marcellus Edwards, who was the old Buffalo Soldier's sister.
Oh, okay. And was your dad in the Army during World War II?
My dad was in the Army during the Korean War.
Oh, okay. Did he get over to Korea?
He did not. He did not get to go to Korea, which he always attributed it to a big disappointment for him. That was where he had hoped to go, so he never got to go to Korea.
And what did he do while he was in the Army?
The only thing that I know of is that he was a staff sergeant. I'm not sure what his specific duties were. I'm not really sure of that.
And how did your do you remember how your parents met?
Yes, I do, actually. They met at a dance at Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, I believe
yes, it is. Yes, it's right over in Henderson.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
right across
where they
the
met.
river from Evansville.
Yes, they met at a USO dance there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, was he from Evansville?
No, my father was from a town called Lebanon, Kentucky.
Yeah.
Actually, he was born in New Albany, Indiana, but his family ended up in Lebanon, Kentucky.
Is that close to New Albany?
So that is actually, it is, I believe, southeast of Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah, well, New Albany is too, so it's probably right across the river, kind of like Henderson and Evansville, perhaps. Yeah.
Yes.
So, your mom, she grew up in Evansville?
Yes, my mother grew up in Evansville.
Where did she go to high school?
My mother went to Lincoln High.
Okay.
That was the school where Black or African Americans attended.
But that, okay, yeah, okay, and it must have been pretty new when she went to it, because I think it was built in the early 30s, maybe?
It could have been. My mother was born in 1929, so
yeah.
I don't know the history of Lincoln High.
That's
but
right, okay. And how did her family and her ancestors all end up in Evansville?
To the best of my knowledge, which is all I have to go on, I know that my grandmother, which would be my mother's mother, so my maternal grandmother, grew up in Rockport, Indiana.
Yeah.
She attended Terre Haute University and was a school teacher in Evansville. So I'm not sure how the migration took place. And then my maternal grandfather was born in Mount Vernon, Indiana. So all very close geographically, and somehow they ended up in Evansville.
how about the ancestors? Let's say on your mother's side first. How far back can you trace it? I mean, back to slave days, perhaps, or anything like that?
On my mother's side, I really don't. I can go back to my grandmother's mother and know that she was Native American and African American.
Oh,
And my grandmother's father was white.
oh, okay. By Native American, do you know the tribe?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Not on my grandmother's side. On my grandfather's side, who would be Charles A. Edwards, my mother's father, we have been spending a great deal of time researching that part of our heritage. And what we are aware of is that his mother was Molly Bland and his father was James Edwards, and they were enrolled in the Dawes under the Cherokee Nation.
Oh, okay. And now, on your dad's side of the family, have you been able to, how far back can you go with them?
Yeah, so my father's family, we're actually probably more blessed than most people would be in that we can go back on his father's mother's side of the family back to slavery.
Really?
Back to Mary Miles, who was the only slave owned by Dr. Guy Porter. And actually it was Dr. Guy Porter's wife that had the money, not Dr. Guy Porter, but so she was the actual slave owner. Mary Miles was her only slave. She had children by two different men at that time, and the the family line basically ran through the Porter side. One of the men that she had children with was a Porter, and so that's how we treated
It was
them.
a white man?
No,
he
was actually
African.
African American.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Mhm.
And where was that?
Let's see.
Was it was it a big plantation or little?
No,
or?
actually, it was actually in Ohio, which
Oh.
everyone seems to think slavery didn't occur
Oh.
south of the Mason-Dixie. But even though slaves had been free, slavery still took place
I see.
in other places. And so, yes, it was a place in Ohio, and I believe it's just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Well, since that's getting pretty close, pretty
Yeah.
far south.
Yeah, getting
Anyway,
there, but
right-
getting
right
there, but
across-
still north.
Because I have relatives on my mother's side, Hayden's, that came up through Kentucky, and they had slaves in Kentucky.
Yes.
You know, even though Kentucky was a border state and was
Right.
yeah,
Right.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah. So on that side of the family, as the family then branched out, Native Americans came into play in that family. And so on my grandmother, my father's mother is a Spalding, and Spaldings are half Native American. My grandmother passed away, I believe, in 1998, and she had been recognized that year earlier on NBC as being the oldest living African American, Native American living in that
Really?
county. So it was pretty awesome. Yes.
were they Cherokee also?
Correct.
Uh-huh.
Correct. Cherokee from, believed to be from around the area of Union County, Kentucky, but there's a small area there called St. Mary's, Kentucky, that also had a huge Cherokee settlement. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where one of St. Mary's, Kentucky. I was just down there with my mom a couple of years ago. We went back because, again, one of her relatives was hung as a spy. He was a Confederate soldier in northern Kentucky. They used to. There was some renegades. They would go across the river and raid Evansville and around there and Rockport and stuff. And so they said if they caught any Confederates, he was going to hang them, and they did.
Oh,
but
my.
they should not have, because they were in uniform. You know,
Mhm.
they were not irregulars or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, they're buried right there in St. Mary's,
Wow.
Kentucky. And we
Really?
went to the graveyard at the church and saw his grave. Yeah.
Oh, how neat.
He
Yes.
was a Powell.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's fun. I love going back in
Yeah.
history, and I always like history anyway, and it's kind of why I'm doing this. And but your own family, to find stuff about them, is really
Absolutely.
quite interesting. And our Basil Hayden is part of this Hayden family. They were Catholic and came to Maryland in 1600s, and started a distillery in the late 1700s and eventually moved into Kentucky down around Bardstown. But anyway, it was
Oh.
old granddad. If you,
Yes.
it has a picture of the granddad, well, that's him. He's our relative.
Oh, how neat. Okay, so where Bardstown is, Lebanon, where we're from, is just like about a 20-minute
It-
drive. As a matter of fact, when we go back there, we stay in Bardstown because there's one hotel in Lebanon and it's usually full. So,
yeah. Yeah, they were effectively the first Catholics that came. They came early 1800s. First Catholics that came. They came from Maryland to Kentucky.
you're really making the hairs on my back crawl because behind a picture of my grandmother, after she passed away, was a newspaper article about the Catholic migration to and the settlement there.
Yeah.
And the article was from, I don't even know what year it was from,
I'd love to
but
see
way
that.
back in the
Yeah.
past.
Oh, I'd
And
like to see that.
it told the whole story. So what you're saying is absolutely 100%
Yeah.
what this article spoke to. And
I think
yeah,
it was Holy Cross.
interesting.
I think was the church that they founded at the time. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd
absolutely.
like to-
Very.
yeah.
I'll ask my sister if I can get a hold
Get
of that.
that picture of her. Give me
Yeah,
a copy or something. That would be fun to see.
Yeah.
And I'll send you what I have too. And there was a Hayden who had been a slave, a black man who was very famous, and I've got some information about him too, from down in that area. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they
That's
didn't really
interesting.
have plantation in Kentucky, but they
Right.
had a farm of some sort, and they
Right,
had a
right,
few
right.
slaves on there, and so I think he
Right.
was one of them. Okay, wow, that was great.
Wow, that
We
was.
learned a lot there. And brothers and sisters, you?
Wow. Yeah. So I had 7 brothers and 3 sisters, and actually the youngest of our siblings passed away. But yeah. So there were 11 of us.
And can you name them all?
I can. So Gary Edwards, Jerry Edwards, Marion Porter, Leo Porter, Mary Porter, James Porter, Percy Porter. Then that's where I fall in, Cassandra. And then my younger ones are John Porter, Rebecca Porter, and then Thomas Porter.
And why are some Edwards and some Porters?
So the first 2 children, my mother's first 2 children, were with her first.
Okay, she was married twice. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And when you were telling me, let's see, did we talk about the Edwards family? I mean, heritage back.
Yes, just about as far my grandfather being the only one that we could really go back to, that his parents are enrolled in DAWs, and that's about all we know about him.
Okay.
We certainly have been gathering a lot of information. His father was believed to have changed his name for his own protection, because being Native American, and they had supposedly been linked to horse thievery, and so they changed their names multiple times. So we really don't know if Edwards was the original name or not, but that was the name that my grandfather was born under.
And you said something about DAWs. What is
So I don't know the correct. I could not tell you what, but it's a database that all Native Americans were asked to register under, and I believe it was in the 1800s, and they requested that all Native Americans register their names and their family members into this database that was kept by the government. And so the story that I learned as I was going through doing my own research on my own family was that many Native Americans either refused to enroll or may have falsely enrolled. So, but basically, once you enroll, then you're given the enrollment number that attributes you to that particular tribe.
Oh, okay. If you don't mind, I kind of like to go on a little tangent over to George's family. His middle name is Buckner, and he's quite proud of that.
Yes.
Can you tell me why?
Well, Dr. Buckner was an ambassador, and when he basically retired, and I don't know his full history. He moved to Evansville, and he may have originally been from there, but I do know that he moved to Evansville. And as Uncle George was growing up, he kind of became his mentor and really helped him make decisions and give him a basis of how he was going to lead his life. He was named after Dr. Buckner because in a town like Evansville, you know, to have someone of African American heritage be that prestigious was an honor, and so from what I know, his mother wanted him named after someone like that. So.
Oh, okay, well, good. And George's father, did he work at the post office? Is that what George told me, or do you?
He worked for the railroad.
The railroad.
Yes, and I'm not sure of the exact railroad company it was, but he worked for the railroad in Evansville, and he also owned a business called Cherokee Cleaning Company.
That's
that
right.
he did on the side.
Yeah, okay. And he had a rather large family, right? George had a lot of brothers and sisters.
Sure, yes, he did. He did, and ironically, in his interview, he left out my mother's name. It was the first thing I caught, but yes, he did. He had, there were 13 girls and 7 boys.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so, and where did you live when you were growing up?
Well, I believe we lived on Cherry Street and A Street for a while, but when I was 2, my father actually bought a home under his GI Bill, and we moved on Grand Avenue, which was right across the street from the monasteries. I think it's St. Clair Monastery. I'm not sure of the exact name.
Or maybe the Poor-Claires, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and what, so Grand and
Let's see, across street would have been, would have been, I have to kind of remember because it's been a while since I've been to Evansville. And let's see, not Washington, not Lincoln, Cherry Street, maybe Walnut seems too far removed. I know that Kentucky was a street over. Kentucky Street, I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I know.
Street.
Yeah.
Was a street over from where we lived.
Okay. Yeah.
I think, I'm trying to think.
Now, was it all African Americans that lived in that neighborhood?
No, actually it was not, believe it or not. There were, when we first moved there were probably maybe about 3 to 4 African American families that lived in the area. It was just becoming an integrated community, residents.
So that would have been like 1960 or so that you would have moved there? You said you were 2?
Yeah, so in the 60s.
Okay.
Yes.
And so what did your kids do for fun when you were growing up?
Wow, outside, playing all the time. It was that kind of
any parks close to you?
We would walk to Belmead Park and Garvin Park, I believe.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
Garvin was out by Bossy Field, by where the baseball stadium was and stuff.
We would walk there, but we did a lot of, basketball, football, baseball in our own backyard, in our own alley.
And you played with the white kids too in your neighborhood?
In our neighborhood, when we moved into our neighborhood, it was mostly elderly whites that lived there. So there were not a lot of children, white children that lived in our neighborhood. And as people began to either pass away or sell off their property, the neighborhood eventually turned over, and it was mainly African Americans.
Okay. And what grade school did you go to?
I went to St. Benedict up until 7th grade, and then Stanley Hall.
When you all were Catholic, and when did that first start? Who were the first Catholics in your family's way back? Do you know?
Well, on my mother's side, from what I understand, my grandfather was a Catholic. When he married my grandmother, who had been Baptist, she converted to catechism.
No, was he African American?
No, he was Native American.
Oh, he was, okay, he was Native American, a Catholic.
Yes.
Okay. And so that kind of filtered down to everybody?
That did, and on my father's side, my grandmother and as far as I know, my grandfather was they were Catholic also. They were a huge Catholic African American community in Lebanon, Kentucky, and St. Mary's and New Albany as they moved to different places. But yes, they were all Catholic as well. So I don't know where it came.
Well, maybe because their slave owners may have been Catholic.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that's
Absolutely.
probably what it was.
I certainly, when I studied some of the history, found out that that's basically how Native Americans, assimilated into catechism because of who maybe was around them or the influence, the missionary influence in the settlements where they lived.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess you went to church quite often. Your family was pretty religious then?
Oh, absolutely. It was a daily tasking. It was, yes, we did. We did. I found a lot of solace in that, but yes.
Do you remember any of your favorite nuns at St. Ben's?
Well, my favorite nun and the only one that I could really even call out the name to would be Sister Mary Cordelia, because she was my kindergarten teacher, and she had been my siblings' kindergarten teacher. So everyone, you always wanted that to be your teacher. So yes.
When you were at St. Ben's, were you the only African Americans pretty much that went there?
At that time, up until 6th grade, yes. Our family was the only family up until 6th grade. In 6th grade, from what I understand, St. John's, the school was closing, and so the African American students that were attending St. John's were basically distributed to all of the Catholic churches. And so at that point, then a bigger influx of African Americans came to our schools. So.
And we had talked about earlier, I think it was George's parents that were kind of got the St. John's Parish started.
Yes, they were part of the founding fathers of St. John's Church, and there's an awesome video that shows the history and how the church was built and came together, and the influences and the different bishops and cardinals that were involved in the building of what's standing there now as the church.
Does George have a copy of that?
He does. He may. If he doesn't, I do. So
okay.
yeah.
I'd like to get a
I'll
copy
make sure
of
you
it
get
myself.
a copy. It's very historical.
Yeah, I would love to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Your brothers, I guess, were they altar servers and stuff?
My brothers were altar servers. Yes, they went to church and they served all the way. All of them became altar boys.
Who do you remember? The pastors, the priests who were there?
Only one priest that I remember is Father Alvin. He was the principal when I was there. That's the only priest that I remember.
Do you remember the movie theaters you used to go to?
So I don't. I didn't have the experience maybe of going to theaters like possibly my uncle did and my mother's did. So no, I don't.
You didn't go to the movies?
I think I remember one time my mother taking us to see Jesus Christ Superstar, and so that was much later in time. But but I don't. We went to the drive-in. I remember the drive-in. That's my memory, is the drive-in. We went as kids. We had a station wagon, and everybody piled in. And we went to the drive-in.
Yeah,
that's
that was kind of that was fun. So, where'd you go to high school then?
I went to high school. I went to Harrison High School. Harrison High School had not quite been integrated as much. I think we were into the second year of integration. It was a very interesting time. It was 1972, and
the Vietnam War was just kind of winding down.
Just kind of winding down.
Do you remember much about that and the protests and things like were in your high school? Were kids protesting and things like that? Or junior high?
Not really. Not about the Vietnam War. Not a lot of protesting that I can remember. What I remember the most was how people felt day to day about the Vietnam War within our family. I had a brother who was in the Air Force, and I had a brother who basically was considered a deserter, was later turned himself in and then served with the Army. And so that was always the conversation in our household around the time of the Vietnam War. And then of course I remember Clarence, who was my brother's best friend, and I remember him the day he came home from the war, and being in a bandage and being paralyzed on one side and hardly ever, not really being able to walk without the assistance of his mother. And I remember that just being probably one of the most profound experiences of my childhood, because it really hit home that, okay, people leave and go to war and they can come back, but they're going to come back and not be the same. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you went to St. Ben's up to 8th grade?
Up to 7th grade.
7th grade. And then where?
I went to Stanley Hall.
Oh, okay.
I went to Stanley Hall for up until 9th grade.
Was that a junior high kind of a thing?
Stanley Hall was still an elementary school, and basically a couple of things happened during that time. My father worked as a custodian for St. Benedict's.
I meant to ask you, what your dad did.
He worked as a custodian. He had been a truck driver and had other jobs, and he worked as a custodian and basically, gave back his salary in order for us to attend. We would not have been able to attend Catholic school.
Right.
And when I was in 6th grade or 7th grade, I can't remember, I think it was 6th grade, he got a job working for the post office. So he wasn't going to be able to provide the services. And so at that point, our parents made the decision that we would go to public school.
Was that a shock to you? Or?
It was culture shock to a whole different level. Yes.
A good way or a bad way?
Wow.
Both ways, probably.
Both ways. I would say the most negative impact was that academically, I felt I was in a far different place academically, and I can remember my first day in 7th grade feeling like it was something I had learned when I was in like 1st or 2nd grade. So I felt challenged, and I think it was a point in my life where I really felt like I lost a lot because of where we were academically at St. Ben's and where this school was academically. So, yeah. So, and that from a benefit, it basically, as my mother said, shocked us into the real world. This is the real world, and you learn a lot about other people and differences. So, yeah.
And did you like high school? You went to Lincoln?
No, I didn't go to Lincoln. I went to Harrison.
Harrison, that's right.
Yeah, I liked high school, but it was an interesting experience.
Tell me, was there much racial tension?
Yes, actually it was. When I give speeches to schools and church groups, basically this in the month of February, I always talk about my experience in high school, because on our first day, actually, of high school, we were actually greeted with protesters. So we were a bus of about 30 children. Miss Gladys was our bus driver, and she was awesome. A little short, white woman who just loved us to death and was always there for us.
And you were all African Americans.
And we were all African Americans on the bus. There was about 30 from our neighborhood. Most of us had attended Stanley Hall, and I think in the whole school at the beginning of that year, there was probably no more than whoever could fit on that bus at that time that went to Harrison that was African American. And so the first day of school was getting off the bus and then getting back on the bus and going home, because we didn't stay.
That was because of the protesters?
Because of the tension.
But you were supposed to stay. But
we were supposed to stay, but there was the school.
And this was 1972.
72.
Oh, 72.
Yeah, 72. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it probably was.
Yeah, 72. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so we spent that first year kind of doing that on what felt to me was an ongoing basis. So it was very frustrating.
By doing that, you mean you didn't get into the school?
We did go to.
But you still had.
But there would be days when protesters would call in threats, and so we would get on the bus and go back home. And
were the protesters students or were they adult? Oh.
No, that's one of the things when I'm talking to youth groups, I tell them, we learn a lot of times as children how to behave and how to act, but based on our role models and who we see, who role models for us. And in those situations, it was, I don't ever recall students. Now, there could have been, but they weren't students from the school. As far as I'm concerned, they weren't. It was older people, adults.
Well, were there fights going on between students and things like that, or?
There were at times, but not to the level that you would think, especially having that type of protest. You would think that it would be more extreme. My memory is that it was not that profound. One of the things that generated out of that experience that I think benefited the school as a whole was something called the Human Relations Program. And that basically was started to bring together students of all different backgrounds. I think there was someone Chinese in the group and a Vietnamese, and so I don't know all the nationalities, but I actually have a picture of us in the yearbook. But anyway, we came together, and our goal was to then speak to and advocate for cohesive environment within school. And so we did a lot of activities and community service work and being mediators in conflict to prevent those types of things from happening. So yes.
Do you have any personal experiences of when you were in high school of anybody giving you a bad time at school, another student or a teacher or anything like that?
I can honestly say no. I didn't have that experience, and probably was experiencing it and not realizing it, because I had gone to St. Benedict's for such a long time and was the only black student in almost all of my classes. Besides my brother and I were in a lot of the same classes. So besides my brother, and I had already experienced that as a child in school, and I can only honestly say there was only one experience in grade school, and I remember being called the N-word by one of my classmates, and I remember my mother would always say, ask them if they know the meaning of the word out of Webster, and if they say yes, then just tell them that can apply to them. And so, of course, when I explained this to this kid, he just didn't understand what I was saying. He just never called me that again. So that was my experience. I think what I experienced.
How did you react to it when he did that?
Oh, hurt, of course, and shock. It really shocked and.
I mean,
and
at the time, you knew that was.
I knew
not. It was not a good word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I knew that it was not a good word. I knew it was not okay to use. That was probably the biggest experience in grade school, other than when I was in the last year that I was at St. Benedict's. There was a summer party, and I was invited. And at that year, actually another family had come to the church that was African American, and I was told that I could come, but I couldn't let the other child know because the color of her skin was too dark and she wouldn't be allowed to come to the party. And I remember going home being so hurt and telling my mother about this experience, and my mother explaining to me that then I have to make a moral judgment myself and a conscious judgment about whether or not I feel like I really want to go. And so I opted not to go to the party. So, yeah.
Other than that, when you were at St. Ben, were you included in play and all this kind of stuff?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, there were always remarks that people made, but I don't know. My mother just. I have to say, my mother gave me such a foundation of how to be tolerant of, she would say, people's ignorance, that I could let a lot of things roll off my back. So I was always included,
and
but
probably
I would
a lot of those things kids call even their names or this or that, or make fun of them or whatever. And so probably I'm sure most of the time it was just that. It wasn't because you were black or whatever. It was just whatever.
Yeah. So a lot of times I would hear things a lot of times. We were a poor family, so a lot at St. Ben's came from
Right.
being poor, more so than being black, because people knew we were poor, knew why my father was working there, and that type of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Serbians on the rich east side. That's
Yes,
all the rich
absolutely.
people. And John,
Yes.
my friend John, he went to Memorial, but he's from a modest background, but we always kidding about it. Goes out on the west side. That's where us poor people were.
Yes,
Modern
yeah.
day, stuff like
Yeah,
that. The
so-
Bossy and Memorial were were the rich kids.
The
right?
rich kids, yeah. So that I think I dealt with that more as a barrier a lot. So more so than.
Did you have a special boyfriend in high school?
In high school, I did. I had a high school was a difficult time for me because when I was a freshman was when my mother became ill.
Oh.
And my mother became ill, but I did have a boyfriend.
What's his name?
His name is Jerry Merriweather. He's lives in Baltimore now, and we're very good friends.
Do you remember Porter Merriweather? Do you know that name? He went to Lincoln. He was a really good basketball player like in the 50s. I remember.
I don't
But his
know.
name was Porter Merriweather.
Yeah.
I remember him.
Yeah, no, I don't remember that
Okay,
that person.
yeah.
I don't even know if they're related,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah.
But I spent a lot of that time really just kind of helping my family while my mother was ill.
What was the matter with your mom?
My mother had a tumor on her brain, and it was an inoperable tumor to a point. They were able to remove all except a flat surface of it, and then she eventually she lived for 8 years, but she died of complications from the.
And your dad, when did he?
My
pass?
dad passed away when he was 55 from, let's see, prostate cancer and
Did he pass away before or after your mom died?
after.
Okay. So then, he basically raised you guys himself?
No, actually, my mom. I was in high
Well,
school, and my mother actually lived through my leaving and going to live with my uncle. My father stayed. My father raised my younger siblings that were still at home. So. Mhm.
So did you graduate from here?
I did.
Okay.
I did. Mhm.
And then what?
And then I left and went. Well, I took care of my grandmother. My grandmother was just, and I didn't know at the time, but I found out now that she was going into the early stages of Alzheimer's. She really needed care. She really needed someone to be with her and so I stayed with her, and then I went to Arizona to live with my uncle. So.
And what prompted you to do that?
It had been prearranged when I was very young that I would go to live with my uncle. So as my mother became ill, it became more of a plan of hers. So.
To take care of him or him to take care of you?
Him to take care of me. That had always been, I think, since I was like 2 or 3 years old. Yeah.
Did you need to be taken care of?
I feel like I did, from the sense of I graduated high school. I had goals, I had aspirations of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. But being that my mother was ill and my father was the caretaker, and I had younger siblings at home, I really didn't have the guidance, those 4 years of my mother being ill, other than from my older sister Mary, who was like I always say was our matriarch of our family. She was the one that was raising us because my mother really wasn't in the position to do so,
Right.
and she was the one that was giving us guidance. But I was I think things happen for a reason, and I was at a crossroad as I was going toward graduation. My brother, who was in the same grade as I, was going into the military, as almost all of my brothers except one went into the military. So I didn't see that as an option for me. So I needed, I always say, a break from my life at that time. There was a lot of turmoil happening in my life with my mother, knowing that her cognitive ability was deteriorating every day, and there just wasn't any structure or guidance, so I needed that. Yeah, absolutely.
Was that a culture shock going to the gold fields of Arizona?
It actually was not. I always, again, I say, things happen for a reason. When I was a young girl, I used to always say to my father, when I get older, I'm going out west, and I'm going to live out in the middle of the desert and live just like a cowboy. And so my dad would say, okay, sounds like a plan, let's do that. And so when I actually ended, I think he thought it would be a shock, but it actually was very, it was an experience everyone should have. How's that? Yeah, it took me to the basics of where I needed to be in order to grow as a person. So I have nothing but respect and love for that experience. So yeah.
Had you met George before that?
Yes.
Had
Yes.
Had he come back to Evansville quite often?
Yes. He always stayed at our home.
Oh.
When he came to visit, he always stayed with us, and he was very eccentric, as you might imagine. And he would come in these beautiful suits and hat, and ask for a washboard to hand wash his own clothes. So it was always a flip flop to that, his balance in life, as he called it. But so yes, I knew him. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he tells a story about chasing you down and giving you what for. Yeah,
Yes.
Let's hear your version of that.
So my version of that is, yes, when you asked the question, did I feel like I needed to go there? Yes, I needed to go there because I had a lot of, I don't even know how to describe what I had. I guess rebellion would be what most teenagers go through, and having never had gone through that because I was so busy being an adult-like during those years. When by the time I got there, I was 100% rebellious and defiant about anything, if the sun rose or if it didn't. And the only recall I have of that is that he did ask me to do something, and I told him I wasn't, and I ran. And yes, he did catch me, but no, he didn't take off his belt and swat me. None of that. But he likes to tell that story, so we let him tell it. But
so it wasn't you were trying to run away. It's just you didn't want to do what he was
I didn't want
telling
to
you.
do.
Okay.
Yeah, I was very defiant. I needed I needed that military experience. So I always tell people, if you go live with him, he's going to sign you up for boot camp, whether you want to enlist or not. And if you can survive it, you're going to be pretty successful in life.
Tell me a little bit about where it was and the surroundings and all that kind of stuff.
So he actually lives in owns property in what's called Oglebay, California. So Oglebay, California is let's see, and I'm horrible with directions, but I think it's west of Yuma. And
California or Arizona?
It's on the California side.
Oh, it is. Okay.
It's right past the immigration checkpoint outside of Winter Haven, California, which is right outside of Yuma, Arizona, borders Yuma, Arizona.
Okay.
And it's 164 acres. And at the time that we went there, he lived in a trailer, and he had a trailer and a mobile home and like a little camper. Mm-hmm. So I stayed in the trailer, he stayed in the camper.
Okay.
And completely isolated. We eventually got neighbors. People rented a space off of the property and lived there.
And you said there's a working gold mine?
American Girl Mine is a working mine, and it's there. It's not actually on the property, but it borders the property. So that was a huge experience. At the time, there were many wannabe prospectors that wanted to camp out on the property and search for gold. And BLM also owns a lot of the land that borders with the property. So BLM was constantly driving on and off property, prospectors who owned land and those who didn't. And so it was a continual, what should I say? I don't even know what the right word was, but conflict between all entities. And so everyone had their own, I remember at one point in time, there was like a security service hired just to protect the property of the actual landowners from BLM. So it was very, very Western, as I had pictured that I wanted to grow up and live. So yeah. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, researchers came out all the time that wanted to take samples of the land or insect life, and so they were on the property all the time. They would come and ask, could they go out and could they.
Did you ever visit the gold mine?
I went all the way up to where you actually can go into the place. So I didn't actually go into the mine itself, but yes. Mm-hmm.
Oh, did you have Did you have animals?
No,
Oh, yeah.
no animals.
No horses. You didn't get to ride.
No horses, no animals. Our neighbors did. The people, they had pigs and they had horses and they actually had animals. But no, we had no animals.
So you weren't a real cowgirl. Then.
No, not really. Not that's more living in Nevada now than down
well,
there. But
yeah, I guess so.
yeah, so no, we didn't have.
And I think
any
you
animals.
you got a job in Yuma. You said.
I got a job in Yuma working for Dr. Hulchin as a bookkeeper.
And he was a.
He was an ophthalmologist.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I worked for him for about 2 years.
And then what?
And then I met my former husband. He came to the property to Ogilvy with my brother one Thanksgiving, and that's how we met.
Oh.
And we stayed in touch, and we eventually married. Mhm.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what's his name?
His name is Bruce Edward Runnels,
Okay.
and he was in the Navy. He served 20 years in the Navy as a yeoman.
Oh, okay. So he was in the Navy when you met him?
Yes.
All right.
He was in the Navy when I met him, and then thus my Navy career began.
Yeah.
uh,
Now, is
and
he African American?
he
too?
is. He
Okay.
is. Mhm.
And where did he grow up, or where did he?
So
come
he was
from?
born in Chicago, Illinois, and grew up as a Navy child, or Navy brat, as we called ourselves back in those days. But he was a Navy brat, and he had been his family had been stationed in Virginia, Nebraska, and he ended up back in Chicago with his mother.
Okay. And so when you met him, where was he stationed then?
He was stationed on the USS Enterprise, and it
Oh.
was docked in Oakland, California.
Oh, okay.
And my brother and my cousin were both stationed on that ship. That's how I knew.
They were in the Navy too, and that's how you got to
Yes.
the Navy. Okay.
Mhm.
So how soon did you get married after you started? After you met him?
About 4 months after we met,
Yeah.
we got married.
Mm-hmm. Where did you get married?
We got married in Bullhead City, Arizona. Yeah, with my uncle standing right next to us. Yeah.
Oh, George was there at the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, he pretty much made all those kinds of
And
decisions.
was your husband, was he Catholic too?
No, he was not. No.
Did you get married in the church?
We
or-
did. We
Okay.
did at NAS Barber's Point in Hawaii. We got
Oh.
married in the church.
Yeah.
That was probably like about 4 years later, but yes, we did. Mhm.
Okay. So, so, did you work after you got married? Did you continue to work places, or
When I got married, by that point, I had my own business, CP Secretarial Services, and I had clients that I did bookkeeping work for.
had you gone to school to learn that? Or?
I was taking classes at the time to
In-
learn
in
that,
Yuma?
and I learned a lot. Yes, and I learned a lot from my uncle.
Oh, right,
So
'cause
he helped me establish a business, and then basically with his guidance, I did everything under his guidance. So by the time I got married, my husband was deploying, and so he was going on a 6-month debt. So I made the decision to stay in Yuma with my uncle while he was gone.
He was on the Enterprise.
He was on the Enterprise. Mhm.
Where did they go? Was it a mid?
They went Westpac,
Oh.
so they went, I don't know,
Well.
wherever you go on Westpac.
Okay, yeah.
I think the Philippines and
Now this would have been, what year did you get married?
1978.
Okay.
Hmm. Yeah, 1978. And so by the time I actually left, my uncle's would have been in 1979.
Okay.
Mhm.
And did you go to Oakland then, or what?
No, actually, he got stationed in Bremerton, Washington, and I just didn't want to go to Washington. So he took what's called a swap, where he agreed to change duty stations with another person, and we went to Great Lakes, Illinois.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons, I wanted to be closer to Indiana. His family was from Illinois, and so it just was geographically located was a good place to be. So that's where we went.
Okay. A little colder than
A
Evansville.
little
though.
colder, a lot colder.
Right.
Yeah.
So how long were you there then?
We were at Great Lakes for, let's see, would have probably been about 4 years.
Did you have children while you were there?
We did. We had 2 children while we were there, Alicia and Brandy, and they were both born at Victory Memorial Hospital right outside of Great Lakes. We lived on the base in the oldest housing that they had on the base. It's not there anymore, but they referred to it as Flintstone housing because of the concrete floors, and everything in it was concrete. The steps were concrete. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Did you work there too?
I did not
Yeah.
work
Okay.
there. No.
And those two children, what are they doing these days?
So Alicia works for a company called West. She's a breast cancer survivor, so she's kind of fighting that these days. But she works as a trainer for a telemarketing company called West. And
Where does she live?
she lives in Reno, Nevada. She has a degree in medical billing and coding, but she does not like the medical field. So, and then the younger one, Brandy, is about to graduate from UNR. She actually has worked for Amazon.com for about 11 years. She's about to graduate from UNR with her BA in psychology.
That's Nevada, Reno.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
University of Nevada, Reno. Yes.
Right. Okay. And okay. No kids married yet?
None of my children. Well, my oldest daughter was married, and
she was. Okay.
yeah, but
Any
none of the
children?
rest. I have one grandson.
Yeah, you do. Oh,
Yes,
okay.
I have one grandson, Ian, who I take care of. He lives
Oh,
with me, and
yeah. Oh,
he's
really?
6 years old, and
Oh.
yeah, he's.
Keeps you hopping, I'm sure.
He does. He does. He makes me young because you have no choice.
Do you have other children besides?
I do. When we went to Hawaii, I had my third daughter, Tracy. She was born in Hawaii at Balboa. No, not Balboa. Tripler Army Medical Center. And that's kind of when I first went to work for the military. After she was born, she was about 2 years old. I got a knock on the door, and a young Filipino lady handed me this baby, and she said in her broken English that she had to leave and that she left a note on her door. That's the gist of what I got out of what she was saying, and that someone would be by to pick up the baby. So she was doing in-home care, and she left and went back to the Philippines, and I had this baby boy that was given to me, beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy. And so later that evening, I didn't know really what to do. I kind of waited, and I said, well, I'll wait, because it was close to getting off time. And sure enough, I got a knock at the door, and this couple, dual military family, came in, and it was their little boy. And from that point on, I became his in-home provider because they were both in the military. And they were about to deploy, and it was very unusual for a husband and wife to deploy at the same time. However, they were going to be one of those first rare experiences. And so I kept this little boy for about 6 months while both parents were deployed on two different places. And I can only say that it broke my heart for the baby, but it pushed me in the direction where I went as far as working, because I thought, that's just one family that's going to need care for a child while they're deployed. There's probably many, many more. And so I became an in-home provider for about maybe a year and a half, probably about a year and a half. And I decided that I was going to go work for military child care. And so I applied, and childcare wasn't my background, business was. But I applied and eventually got hired. First started in a preschool pre-op, and then transferred to the childcare center. And that's where my passion lies. And that was 1986 that I got the official job in the center, and have just been doing that ever since.
Had the military always had that child care for around, or was it fairly new, or?
So child development homes or family child care actually was not an established portion of military child care at the time that I was doing it. So the year that I went, in 1986, they were just making the transition to develop a program called Family Child Care, which was care providers certified by the CO of the base, and they operated under the guidelines of the military, of the OPNAV instruction, and basically provided care in their home, but followed these policies and guidelines that the military established. And they would have a monitor that would come out to ensure that they were doing what they had to do, and ensuring that the children were in a safe environment. So that was just about to become established as I was transferring to working into the center. So at the time that I was doing it, it wasn't an established family child care program, but it was growing. It was becoming a family child care program. And so I didn't become a home care provider officially, but that was my start. And that was 1986. The Military Child Care Act was signed in 1989. I had been working for military child care then for 3 years. In 1989, the Military Child Care Act was signed, and what it did was it brought into place guidelines and procedures and policies that all military child care programs, not just Navy, would have in place to ensure that military children were cared for in a safe environment. Prior to that, on basis, if you looked to see where military child care was being conducted, it was being conducted in condemned gyms or old barracks where, you know, the facilities and the services and the environment was really not safe. And so children were becoming hurt. There were guidelines for background checks. And so the Military Child Care Act really pulled together what was required for that.
And so you have how many children now together?
So I have 4, and so in 1991 I had my son.
Okay.
We were living in San Diego at the time, and my husband was ending his military career, had not quite ended it, but was sort of ending it. And we were living in San Diego. He was stationed on the USS Benjamin Stoddard. He had was a part of, he had worked under Comdesron 23, and he was a part of Operation Desert Shield. So he was part of a group that actually went out and inspected the ships that were coming in and out of the Gulf, that were and ensuring that they were not breaking any of the I can't think of the word now.
Blockade or whatever.
But yeah, there were restrictions imposed, and they were ensuring that they weren't bringing in goods into port. And so he had just come back from that tour when I got pregnant with my son, and we weren't sure if he was going to be a part of Desert Storm,
Right.
because he had been a part of Desert Shield. So his ship, he was on the Independence during that time. His squadron was, and they came back in December, right before Desert Storm began. And so he was kind of like that precursor to Desert Storm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did he end up in Desert Storm?
He ended up not having to
Not
go to
having to
Desert
go to Storm. Okay.
Desert Storm. He did Desert Shield, and he did not have to go to Desert Storm. We transferred from San Diego to Fallon in 1993, which is where I now live, and he made that his retirement duty station. And I had a son, and moved to Fallon, and thought, well, I'll take some time off. I won't work, but I found myself volunteering on a daily basis, so I just said, might as well go back to work. So.
And your son, what's his name?
My son is Bruce Edward Runnels II.
Okay. And what's he doing now?
And so right now he's he graduated about 2 years ago, and he's actually not just living at home trying to figure out his life.
Okay. And your third daughter?
My third daughter is Tracy. She was
Tracy.
born in Hawaii, and she actually is attending UNR under a mentorship program there, working in early childhood, kind of trying to follow in my footsteps, but beating to her own drum. So she's great. Yeah.
So you were at Barbers Point for how
Yes.
long were you there?
We were at Barbers Point from about 6.5 years, from
Really?
1983 to 1989.
Did you like it over there?
I love Barbers Point. It was
It's on Oahu?
Oahu. The environment was
How
beautiful.
far is it from, say, Ford Island and, the Pearl Harbor?
Pearl Harbor, I'm going to say 30 to 40 minutes. It might be a little bit longer than that. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say about that far.
It's
Yeah.
a naval air station too, is it not?
Yes.
Mhm.
It's not an active base like it was before when we lived there, but it was then. And
When you got to Fallon, what was that like? What planes did they have? You said Top Gun's there now, but they were not then.
no, when I got to Fallon, the base was a training base like it is now. Basically, did not have the capability to train with pilots like it does now. There were detachments on the base, and there was actually a bigger permanent party at the time. The buildings were very old. The mission of the base was the same. It was a training facility where cadets would come in and they would train, and carrier air groups train there now, but at the time, different groups, squadrons would come there and train. Because of the terrain and because of the airspace, they would come there to do training. It was a very small base. It still is. But as far as everyone seemed to know everyone, and the function of the base was to train, to send people off to other places.
And your ex-husband, where does he live now?
He lives in Chicago now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But when we lived in Fallon, when we moved there, he retired in 1995. He became the first, and at this point, only African American police officer in the city of Fallon.
Really?
So he was there for about, I don't know, I think about a year. We separated in 1996 and divorced in 1997. So he had already retired and was a police
Did he have
officer.
20 years in?
He did. He did. Yeah. Yeah, and then he stayed within the state and went on to become a corrections officer and retired from the state.
Of
Nevada.
Oh, Nevada. Okay. And then he moved back to
Correct.
Chicago. Okay.
Correct.
So he's retired in
Yes.
Chicago. He doesn't work or anything.
No,
Yeah.
no.
So, what? No. When did Top Gun? How did that come about? Why are they there?
I'm not really sure the whys of it, so I don't think I don't want to say
Yeah.
that answer, other than I know that the airspace, the undeveloped land that Nevada has was a key factor in that. Pilots have the ability to do a lot of strategic planning because the terrain is similar to Afghanistan, to Iraq, and those places where they're fighting now. And one of the biggest air spaces from land to air, and then of course if you airspace that they can fly and train in. And so they moved from Miramar to Fallon, I believe it was in 1999. And it was to bring about, from the community perspective, that the town was really going to take off and grow, because it was going to be more permanent parties would be there, and it would be bring in a lot of military. It didn't do that from the perspective that the community thought, because the pilots that come are either young pilots and they don't have little children, right. So you know they may be by themselves. And at the time, a lot of the families, their families stayed in Miramar, and only the service members came. Yeah. And so, but it's a huge training facility, and it provides a lot of the training for the pilots right before they deploy.
Do they fly down here any? Do they come into Palm Springs?
I'm not sure if they come into Palm Springs.
We have some Navy military that come in here once in a while, but I'm not sure where they're from.
I'm not sure if they come into Palm Springs. I know they do a lot of, or we receive a lot of debts from our CAGs, carrier air groups, from Lemoore, Virginia, San Diego, Canada. I think we just had a group from Japan. So.
Yeah. Tell me what your job's like now.
So my job now, working with the military as a child and youth director, is basically I'm a facility.
Oh, okay. Well, this is a little bit different then, though. Okay. Well, let's go back and tell me the transit, or what, give me a little background now on how that came about.
How I became a director of child and youth programs. So I basically, when I was in Hawaii and I was working in child and youth programs, I was a acting supervisor. But
does this come under the umbrella of the family service?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does now. It didn't then.
Oh, okay.
Didn't then, but it does now. But yes, by the time I got to Fallon, I decided to go back to go ahead and work instead of take time out. And in Yuma, I spent a little time in Yuma while we were stationed in San Diego. My husband was in Desert Shield, and in Yuma I worked at the Marine Corps Child and Youth programs there. And then when we got to Fallon, I decided to go back to work, and I went to work as a child care. Became the trainer for the military child care programs, and I was the trainer for about 4 years before 3 to 4 years before I became the director of the program. Um, as the trainer, I was responsible for implementing a lot of those policies that the Military Child Care Act had put into place, and to get the program accredited. All military programs had to be accredited by a certain year. That was a congressional mandate, and our program in Fallon had gone through a lot of stressors, turnover, and so I basically had to, as a trainer, ensure that staff received the training and the policies were becoming implemented. And we were in a situation where we were turning over directors every I don't know, 1 to 2 years. And so the instability of the program was very much impacting whether or not we could maintain the policies that the Navy wanted us to
Was that
maintain.
because personnel were getting transferred? The ones that were, I mean, were they military wives and things like that were?
No, that really wasn't impacting. I think it was the culture of the community. Fallon's a very small community, and then you're trying to put into place changes that maybe were contradictory to practices that have been acceptable for many years. So
Most of the people working were from outside in the community.
in
They
the
weren't
community,
from
they
the
weren't
military.
military spouses,
I see.
as they are now. Most of them are military
Oh, they are
spouses.
now.
Mhm. Yeah. So basically, my job was to ensure that these policies were being implemented and that the program could go through accreditation and become accredited. And so we were able to successfully do that in 1997. We were for Fallon, we were the first accredited program in Fallon, Nevada.
Did you agree with all the policies that?
Initially I didn't agree with all of them, but I've always been taught that it's not my place to agree when you're working under an organization, especially the military. There's going to be a lot you disagree with. However, your job isn't to disagree, it's to get the job done. So that's what we did. And so it was a painful process bringing other people on board to get the job done, but we did. We were able to do that. And really able to bring about a lot of positive changes for the program. It's a very, very good program, and children are well cared for, so yes.
But now you're in youth and activities more?
So in 2006, they merged a position where school-age care programming, which was kindergarten through 12th grade, was always run as a recreational-based program under Morale, Welfare, and Recreation, which is MWR. In 2006, the Navy converted that into child and youth programs, and then we became a partner of Fleet and Family Services. So it's Fleet and Family Child Programs is basically the umbrella we're under now. And so in 2006, I became the administrator over all of the programming. And basically that gave me the responsibility of ensuring that those programs the school-age care programs would become accredited, and hopefully child development homes, which we're still working on that. But so we were able to get our school-age care program accredited in, I think it was 2007. And then just recently, in 2011, we were able to get our school-age care program and our teen program accredited. So in 2008, I kind of had a vision to build a teen center, and with the help of the then CO and XO, we were able to convert an unused building into a teen program, and then we were able to get that teen program accredited. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's going strong now?
It is. It's one of my favorite programs, but one of our best programs, yeah. Yeah.
And that's, you work mostly with teens now, or?
Well, my responsibility is overall.
Oh, everything. Okay, I got you. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And how many people do you have under you?
about 30 employees. That includes support staff of a cook, a custodian, 2 operations clerks, and some program leads.
We go up to 29 Palms periodically, and Uh, well, one thing, we took my friend Harry Ziegler. He's was a Marine Corps pilot in World War II, but I mean in Vietnam. Uh, but he had the idea, the Marine Corps ball. They have one. What that is. Uh, that a lot of these young girls don't have a lot of money to go pay for all the dress and paraphernalia you need to go to it. So we collected about 1,000 ball gowns, you might say, or evening gowns here, and took them up to 29 and gave them out to the girls.
That's
But
awesome.
they have a YMCA up there that sounds like it does similar to what you do. Do you have a YMCA on yours?
We don't, and we don't have a YMCA. Our teen and school age care program are affiliated with Boys and Girls Club of America,
okay.
and then they are both chartered 4-H's. So we are not an official Boys and Girls Club, but we're affiliated, and so we offer all the same programming. Our teen program, we have a teen employment program. We've got 6 teens employed right now, where they learn job skills, they learn college readiness, they learn basic life skills, career building, how to plan a budget, just about all the safe driving. We do teen safe driving. They tell us what they want, what they need, and we try to offer that to them. And then we also have guidelines that say we will offer these things. So Military Saves Fair, which will kick off next Monday, and that's a week of activities of teaching them how to plan and save for their future, how to make good choices.
How far are you from Reno?
We're about 60 miles southeast of Reno, so about an hour's drive from Reno.
All right.
And we actually partner with the Air National Guard up there, and we meet quarterly with a program where all military branches of service come together and talk about their programs and what they have to offer.
And what's the population of the town of Fallon? More or
The
less?
population that I last heard, which is as close as I can give you, is about 25,000, and the majority of those are retired military.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, when you have spare time, what do you do in your spare time these days?
My spare time is spent in school. I am working on my master's degree in mental health counseling. It's kind of my next career choice. Basically, spending a lot of time with military families and service members. My experience has been that, they're coming back, and being able to reintegrate into the family is a challenge for a lot of these young service members that come back. And I've had to witness so much of the difficulties of that, and watching military families fall apart because the reintegration process is so extreme. It's difficult for the service member, it's difficult for the family, it's difficult for the children. And so I felt like I needed to tap into resources that are going to help me be a better advocate for these families, because that's, like, as I said, where my passion and my heart is, and I really feel like I could offer more. So my spare time is spent working on my master's degree, reading and studying and doing those things that I have to do in order to be able to provide the military with better services.
Yeah, when we went up to 29 to the lady that was in charge of that took us around and showed us everything, and that was the main thing. Her thrust was to difficult it is for these families when they're away for so long and they come back and they've seen who knows what, to become, and she said it was a real challenge. And
It
sure
certainly is. It certainly is. I think when I made that kind of life decision was maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, and I had a young father come back, and he stood in my office, got out of the way of the door and the window so people couldn't see him. This is a huge, 6-foot tall guy, well built, just tears pouring down his face, and he said, Miss Cassandra, I just can't do it. I wanted to come back and be the good husband and father that I was, but I can't do it. I've got to go back. And it literally broke my heart. I got up and closed the door and let him compose himself, and then let him sit down, and I let him just talk to me. And the experience left him just not feeling like that was his life anymore. And it was really a profound experience for me. I thought to myself, he's just one, and there's so many others
He
coming
felt he
back.
had to go back to combat.
Back to come back. He didn't feel like
Was it because his buddies or what? Or
he just felt like the only thing I could take away from it was he felt like this being back wasn't his life anymore. Yeah, it had taken so much from him. And then just 2 years ago, I had an employee who I'd known since she was a young girl, and her husband said the same thing. To he had to go back, and he went back, and it affects the family in such a way that
Do you think that he eventually will be able to come back and assimilate, or do you
I
think
don't think so.
you just kind of have?
I think he could come back and assimilate with proper mental health and a structure that would help lead him on the path to, maybe being able to let some of that go so that he can relax and be part of his family.
So the schooling that you're getting towards this, what are you learning from that? I mean, does it tell you how to deal with this, or?
Absolutely. Basically learning theories and application, and theories to work with to help people goal set in order to get to the place and the point where they want to be in their life, and
I'm sure
how
it's
to
not
apply.
one size fits all.
That's
sure you
correct.
Have to
So there's
figure out. I mean, that's part of it too.
That's part of it too. So much of it is just learning and gaining the tools of how to help people set for themselves their own personal goals and get to where they want to be, and maybe help them make decisions that are going to be more proactive to what they need to
Does
do.
Fallon have something set up right now?
So right now in the military, they are, and especially the Navy just came on board with it, but the Army had been on board with what is called Military Family Life Consultants. So Military Family Life Consultants, child youth behavioral specialists, work within our programs. They're contractors. They work within our programs. They actually originated right at the onset of Gulf War. And I'm going to tell the story the best that I can. So there's someone that can give you the facts of it. But basically, there was a plane coming back from the Middle East to land in Germany, and Gulf War broke out. As this plane was coming back on the tarmac were families waiting for their loved ones to land because they had been gone on debt. Well, they didn't land. The plane turned around midair and went back. And the emotional effect of the families that were left on the tarmac were so profound that the Army had to call out and reach out and seek mental health counseling for these family members. The children had behavioral issues. The spouses had all kinds of issues of abandonment and stressors from being left overseas, and the service member's not there, and now they're gone off to war. With all of that happening, the Army first contracted with a program who then sent in all of these mental health counselors to work with these families, to work with the reintegration program. They were at Fort Hood when the shooting was there. They played a key role in helping family members. And so for the Navy, we have a mental health counselor that works within our child and youth programs. They're there for the staff and the family members to be able to work with and have a point of contact to go to. It's different from Fleet and Family Services, where they can actually go and get ongoing counseling. This is just a basis where you can come to me and tell me something, and I'm a safe person to talk to. I have a duty to warn, but I'm not going to go to your commander and tell your commander, you know what, he came to me and he said, he's having nightmares. I'm not, as a mental health counselor, that person's not going to go back to the command. So there's no reporting process. So it's a safe place, because what they found was that service members weren't asking for help because they didn't want it to go against their military career. And so here they have these positions in place where service members can go, or their families can go, and as long as it's not an issue of duty to warn, meaning they're not suicidal, there's no abuse taking place, they can go and talk to that person and work, have a bridge to maybe more services if they need it, being referred out to Fleet and Family Services or the local mental health facility.
And your goal is to become, or with it, you want to stay? Well, tell me what your goal is.
Well, my goal really is to stay with the military in some form to offer that type of service. Not necessarily be a military family life consultant, but to be to offer counseling services to military families or service members that are having difficulty with the reintegration process. And I kind of picked that goal because before, the Gulf War, as a Navy military wife, my husband deployed all the time. My husband, when we were in Hawaii, he was at sea most of that time, and out of 20 years of marriage, 12 years were spent deployed. So if you added it all up, although it didn't happen all at once, and so I feel like in one sense I have a background that's relevant to what they're experiencing, and then along with the tools that I'm learning in school, I'll be able to maybe use some of those tools to help families maybe know and recognize signs, that they need help, and hopefully, that will help with the family structure. It's just very painful sitting in the position I am now and seeing that happening and knowing that there's services there, but always thinking that you could do a little bit more yourself.
And when do you hope to have?
In 2015, I hope to be finished, so about a year and a half.
Okay. And would you want to stay at Fallon, or would you be willing to go elsewhere?
I'm willing to go elsewhere. I have thought about that in detail. So my goal is to basically move out of the community that I am in, and maybe move to areas where there are bigger bases.
Right.
Mm-hmm. More services are needed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, gosh, that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's. I said when my son turned 18, I said, okay, then that's my time to do something different. So, yeah.
Well, can you think of anything else you'd like to chat about?
No, I can't. Other than my experience as a military wife, really, I can say.
Maybe this is what you're alluding to, but normally if I have a service member that's maybe saw combat or something, I always ask them if they had any advice to give to a young person going in harm's way. But I can ask you then, would your advice to a young person that is marrying a young Marine or Navy guy or whatever, and it's going to be a military wife for 20 years or so, what might that be?
Wow, yes, that's a really good question, because I get asked it a lot, and I think one of the biggest impact for me, or the biggest benefit to my marriage, I think, was communication. That came from my father, from my uncle, that I refer to as my father, is that you communicate daily. And the other thing is to filter. It's one of the things that I tell my young military mothers all the time. Filter the information coming to you from what you call your friends. You truly have to filter that, because in a world where you want instant information, you're not going to get it as a young military wife. You're not going to get everything instant. It comes more instant now than it did when I was a military wife. But filter doubts and gossip, plain old word gossip. You have to filter that, because if you allow yourself to be sucked into that, you become a part of that, and you basically can set up bridges of failure for yourself within your marriage. You have to be committed to the marriage, and you have to be committed to the fact that the service member is doing a job, that they can't tell you everything that they're doing. They can't call you at every whim, that maybe when they were courting you, and they are put in places and in situations where you may feel like you need to know what they know, but you have to respect their desire to keep that information to themselves, because there's a reason for it sometimes. And so that's the best advice I can give them, and that the only way that your family's going to stay strong is if you communicate within your family more than what you communicate outside of it. And utilize the services of Fleet and Family, the chaplain's office, Navy Relief for the Navy, all of those avenues. There are services, so many services now for military families to get help, to get guidance, to stay connected than there ever were when I was a military spouse. So utilize the services. They're there. They're offered. Many military wives think that if they go to Fleet and Family, it kills their spouse's career. It won't kill his career unless he's done something illegal. So seek out help when you need help so that you stay strong.
And budget-wise, are there problems, or is this like on the front burner of what? I mean, you would think that even Congress, would have to look at this as, really,
Oh, I think it's very important. I don't think that these types of services are going to go away for the military family. I don't think the military family this day and age can do without resources to reach out to in order to stay strong. And it's been proven that the service member is happiest if he knows his family is safe and secure. So I think that there will be budget cuts that will affect a lot of things, but I honestly can't see where mental health services and resources to families and ensuring that the family member is okay, I can't see that as something going away. So hopefully not. Hopefully someone will act with good sense on that.
Okay. Cassandra, I want to thank you for your service to the Navy, and
Oh,
thanks
thank
for
you.
sharing with us.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank
that was
you.
great.
Thank you for the opportunity. I love what
well,
I do, and I always tell people that it's something I would do every day for free. So it's nice to get paid to do what you enjoy doing.
Yeah, well, I can tell that for sure.
Okay, thank
All right,
you.
You're welcome.